I'm so excited to welcome to the Sipping Point, Meaghan Frank.
Thank you so much, Laurie. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
I know we got a chance to do a little virtual wine tasting during COVID. And I thought you were, so intriguing and engaging with all of my attendees. I knew when I rebooted the Sipping Point podcast that you had to come on. So thank you so much for joining us. Your a family winery is up in the Finger Lakes. And I got the pleasure this past May to visit the area and I fell in love. Of course, I was there in May on an 80-degree week, so maybe I didn't see the full reflection of everything of the Finger Lakes, but I had known how much I loved your wines, but what I was blown away just with the entire region. And so I'm really excited for my listeners to learn more about it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really thrilled that you visited us, Laurie. We'll have to get you back up.
Of
But maybe you
course.
brought us the sunshine and warmth because I'm looking
I
out and
hope
it's
so.
maybe snowy and freezing.
Well, you guys are kind of like, to me, like if I think Finger Lakes, I think Dr. Frank, because he really was so instrumental in so many things, really in the whole wine industry on the East Coast and beyond, but certainly in the Finger Lakes. Tell us a little bit from your point of view about the story of how the winery started, and then I love to hear more about your role now.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, Konstantin basically came here. He was a World War II refugee. So he was born in Odessa, Ukraine. From a very young age, became really interested in grape growing and winemaking. So that's kind of an unusual sort
Yeah,
of
right?
passion for a young person. But he actually made his first wine by the age of 15 and then went on to earn a PhD in viticulture. So devoted his life to basically research and experimentation in the vineyards. And World War II brought the family to America. Konstantin, he was in his late 50s at an age when most people would start to slow down. He fully ramped up. And, he arrived in New York with his wife and 3 children in New York City, worked as a dishwasher, didn't speak a word of English, but he had
Wow.
6 other languages under his belt. So he was able to find others, to communicate with. And he heard that the Finger Lakes was sort of a booming wine industry, and that sort of piqued his interest. So when he arrived in the Finger Lakes in Geneva, New York, we have a grape and research station, which is still sort of our premier research institution through Cornell University. And so he came to Geneva, and he was very perplexed because he saw varieties that he was not familiar with. And these are the American varieties, Vitis labrusca, so like Concord, Catawba, Niagara, also French American hybrids, crossing with vinifera and Vitis labrusca. And these were varieties that he just wasn't familiar with, and he wasn't overly excited about the quality of the wines that these grapes were producing. So when he asked, where's the European varieties? Where's the vinifera? Researchers told him it's too cold. And he said, no, I come from a very cold place where these European varieties thrive. It's not due to the cold. And he had a theory that it was due to phylloxera. And that was the reason why these vinifera varieties weren't surviving
Right.
in the eastern United States. Of course, he didn't develop this theory. He had dealt with phylloxera actually in Eastern Europe when he was working in Odessa. And one of his big projects after his PhD was to rejuvenate a vineyard that was devastated by this little microscopic root louse that had devastated, vineyards throughout Europe. And the way that he mitigated that was by grafting the American rootstock with the Vitis vinifera piece, the European variety. And that was completely successful to avoiding the pest. So that's what he pioneered to our region in
Love
the
that.
Finger Lakes, and invited area winemakers and viticulturalists from all over the country, but particularly the eastern United States, to come and learn the grafting technique, take individual vines home with them, and thereby sort of igniting this quality revolution in Eastern American
Yes.
winemaking.
And vinifera, if you're listening and you're like, what? But vinifera is the family of grapes that we all know and love, from Europe, I guess, originally, if you want to think Pinot Noir and Riesling and Chardonnay and grapes that we're all familiar with. In previous to that, we have our homegrown grapes, but they don't make as good a wine as what we have now. And Dr. Frank, of course, without him, Yeah, we'd be drinking a lot of grape juice tasting wines here from the East Coast. So we owe him a huge debt. And now you're so young, but you're there and kind of running the place.
Mhm.
Gosh, how does this work and what's it like? I know you're the fourth generation of the family in the business, and that's kind of unique. Tell me a little bit about how that works.
Oh, absolutely. It definitely has its pros and cons. I think anyone involved in a family business would say the same, but it can be very, very rewarding. But only 3% of family businesses make it to the fourth generation. That's a statistic from the Family Business
Wow.
Institute. So it's incredibly difficult, and we many times through the successions of the generations did not make it, or we were thinking it was not going to happen. When
Right.
Konstantin passed away, so many people said, oh, the vinifera experiment, the European varieties, that experiment has died along with Konstantin. But, his son Willie took the torch and continued to grow the business, started a sparkling winery, which we're celebrating our 40th anniversary of, traditional method sparkling. And then from there, my dad took over in 1993. He worked alongside his father for 13 years before my grandfather passed. And I've been working with my dad now for 15 years. So
Wow.
it's been really rewarding. And it was never my intention to go into the wine industry from a young age. I'm one of three. So I have a sister and a brother. And my
Hmm.
brother was sort of the one tapped from birth, just
Right.
kind of always fallen in line with the male, I guess, of the
Right.
family. I don't think that was like super intentional. It was just sort of the way things had always been. And my brother lost interest around the time I was gaining interest in college. And I just really fell in love with the industry and all the different things that intersect with wine. You have art, you have culture, you have science, you have community. I mean, there's
Hmm.
not one aspect of a good life that doesn't touch wine.
That is so true. I love that. Yeah. And that for me, when I started learning about wine, I'm a kind of a career changer from high tech into wine, but it made me interested in subjects that maybe before I was like, history, I don't know. Like, yes, some of the basics fine, but it really touches everything. That's what you're saying. It's art, it's history, it's community, it's religion. There's,
Mm-hmm.
really tentacles of everywhere that wine reaches. And that to me makes it fascinating because whatever you're interested in, we can find a tie-in with wine for you. So,
Absolutely.
um, I love that you were mentioning your sparkling wine production. You're just getting ready to celebrate your 5th anniversary of making sparkling wine, method traditionnel or method champenois, the method of champagne, if you will. And that's huge being in the US to have that much experience behind you. I know you sent me, and I was hoping we could talk a little bit about your Blanc de Blanc. Uh,
Absolutely.
this, of course, I have the 2020, but Blanc de Blanc, meaning you're only using white grapes, and in this case, Chardonnay.
Mhm.
But how are you going to celebrate the anniversary? And then tell me a little bit more about this wine.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're hoping to celebrate throughout the year. So we have a variety of
Okay.
events that we have planned. We have a really large sort of festival event that's going to happen in August,
Mm,
August 15th through 17th. So
okay.
that's going to be a really fun event. But we're going to have a variety of events both at the winery and also in the trade throughout the year. As you mentioned, Laurie, it's a really exciting milestone for us. And my grandfather had so much he had a lot of opposition when he started the sparkling winery, just in trying to basically establish credibility. The traditional method process is the most labor intensive, the most expensive method to produce sparkling wine. And
Yes.
actually, when he started in 1985, when we had our first vintage, he labeled every bottle Finger Lake champagne because he wanted to legitimize this as
Right.
different than other methods of producing sparkling. When he
Hmm.
passed away in 2006, we've gently removed champagne from the label because we're not in Champagne, France, but we do still, have method champenois to note that the production method, and because we have had this sort of long-term success with this style, we're really bullish on this category for the region. And I think Blanc de Blanc, as in a particular, is really where the Finger Lakes can shine. You mentioned
Mm,
white from white. It's 100% Chardonnay. This wine, I think, has the most sort of elegance and like long-lived freshness.
Yeah.
We, in our style, we don't do a lot of winemaking during the primary sort of stage. There's not a lot of oak fermentation, usually about 5% only. So
Okay.
you're really getting a purity and sort of a freshness coming through, hopefully in the glass, even with
Absolutely.
4 years, aging on the wine lees after the secondary fermentation. You're still
Yeah, I
getting
was
so
gonna
much
say
freshness.
that's a huge investment on your part to leave that wine laying around for 4 years before you can bring it to market and people can enjoy it. But the bubbles are so integrated to this wine and so elegant when you take the sip. I was, when I'm teaching people about tasting sparkling wine, I always joke around about college. I went through this cold duck phase before I
Love
knew
it.
what good wine was, right?
Uh-huh.
And when you drink a less expensive or, let's say cheap sparkling wine and the bubbles are kind of assaulting. And so sometimes people are like, I don't know if I like sparkling wine if they haven't had a method champenois or a really well-made sparkling wine, but it's sparkling, but they just dissolve so elegantly.
Mm-hmm.
It's just beautiful. And to me, yesterday I did an interview with an oyster farmer from here in Maryland, and this
Nice.
would just be so divine with
Perfect.
oysters or really any seafood because it is a little bit more delicate. It's a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
elegant. You don't want something huge necessarily.
For sure.
And you have bigger styles like a Brut and a Blanc de Noir where we can
Yep.
pair with some and a rosé
Mm-hmm.
that's beautiful. But this is really, really nice. And like you said, it's just elegant. It's
Mm-hmm.
really nice.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you, Laurie.
Thank
Even
you for
just some good
sharing
old
that.
fashioned potato chips. It's a
Yes. And
very
French
good go to.
fries,
And French fries.
buttered popcorn.
Oysters
I
are
mean,
good too,
yes.
though.
I know people are like, I don't like oysters. Don't worry. There's a million other things you can eat with this sparkling wine that are going to be delicious, but I'm just obsessed with them. I love them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's one of those things. But you're right. It is, people think they have to do something fancy, but potato chips is perfect. It really
Absolutely.
is. Or microwave
Mm-hmm.
popcorn.
Totally.
When you're in a pinch. Love that. So, sparkling wine, we know you make great. And I think I was probably introduced to the winery through your Rieslings,
Mm-hmm.
and you have so many styles that you can make for years. And I think people are starting to get it. You really have to just kind of go over and over again with people with Riesling because they just
Yep.
assume all Riesling will be sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have everything from bone dry onto dessert styles because that's the beauty of the grape. I know we're not going to taste a Riesling today, but tell me your thoughts on Riesling. Do you think consumers are really, and our listeners, are they getting it yet? What do you see up there in the Finger Lakes?
Yeah, I mean, I think Riesling is sort of the wine industry's best kept secret because,
Right.
you have all of the sort of gatekeepers, the people that are writing about wine, the people that are, teaching classes. You ask them what their favorite grape variety is, and by and large, people are saying Riesling. You have Psalms tattooing Riesling on their arms,
True.
like people
Yeah.
are, but,
The summer of
the summer
Riesling.
of Riesling, it's this
Yes.
grape that you really can't pin down. It's like a
Hmm.
shapeshifter. As soon as you think you understand it, it changes. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about this variety. And, you mentioned Riesling is sort of the flagship grape of the Finger Lakes. We make 9 styles, and that's not a unique thing to find in our region. It's
Right.
so transparent of the soil that it's grown on. So you see a lot of single vineyard expressions. And because you can't put Riesling in a box like you can other varieties like, say, Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc or something where you can Chardonnay maybe is not a good example because there's a variety of oak, treatments that you can do. But by and large, it's a variety that it's not going to fit into a box.
Yeah.
So I think that that's also part of the mystique about Riesling, and it leaves a lot to the imagination, if you will.
Right. And I know people have started, and I believe you do this as well, having the Riesling sweetness scale so that people can turn a bottle around and see, where it
Mm-hmm.
falls from all the way dry to all the way sweet and know. And I think that's kind of maybe been some of the problem for people. You label yours Riesling or dry Riesling,
Right.
and, many other people do as well. So that's helpful, because I think when people don't know, maybe they grab one that's sweet and then they think, see, I knew it. But
Yep.
that's just not. And you do sparkling with
Mhm.
Riesling. So it really is able to be a grape that can take on so many different styles. And I can't think of a lot of others
Mhm.
that are in that. But given that you're, Dr. Konstantin Frank was known for, in addition to bringing vinifera and the European grapes, bringing some of these sort of little known Eastern European grapes, like the Rkatsiteli, which you're famous
Mhm.
for, a white wine that you're famous for, that I don't know that I've seen many other places. But you're introducing me to another one, a red one, to the Separavi, which when I was visiting, I saw that around, and that you even have a festival in the Finger Lakes all around this grape. And it was new to me. So I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on this grape and why you guys love making it.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Rkatsiteli and the Separavi, they're two varieties that are a direct tie to our sort of heritage. And,
Gotcha.
Constantine was very familiar with these varieties. They're actually of Georgian heritage,
Okay.
but widely planted in Ukraine, in Moldova, sort of that whole region of Eastern Europe. And they were, especially during Soviet times, really pushed as the two workhorse grapes that we're going to make a variety of different styles. They're going to grow well in a multitude of different climates. But when you work with them in the vineyard and make sure that the yields are controlled, make sure that, the quality is high, the results are incredible. So that's what we found in the Finger Lakes. Our Rkatsiteli that you mentioned, it's a much harder grape to say than
It is.
Separavi. But
And I was saying
Rkatsiteli,
super Ravi because I thought super, I mean,
yeah,
come on.
yeah. I mean,
But
I like it.
Saparavi,
Yeah,
okay, I
yeah,
love
yeah.
it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's both of those varieties I think have amazing potential. I think probably Separavi even more so because, while our Rkatsiteli is a white variety, we make a few different styles. We make traditional method sparkling, we make a white sort of tank fermented, very pure expression of that white grape, very aromatic wine, but we also do a skin fermented style, which
Mm,
has sort of an orange wine that has some tannin, it has a lot of texture, and that's an homage to something that they do in Georgia as well with these
okay.
large clay vessels, the quevries, which we don't
Yeah.
bury them in the ground. But and then Separavi as a variety, it actually is one of the few red grapes with colored juice. So it's a Teinturier variety in French, that's meant to mean basically it has that color inherently in the juice, which is very unusual. And for
Mm.
us in the Finger Lakes, that is the key to making a deeply hued red wine because we are in a
Yeah,
cold
and this
climate.
really is, for those watching on video, it's quite inky. And yeah, I'm always forever telling people, well, most juice from grapes is clear, and the red skins is what gives the red wine its color. But in this case, I guess the flesh is dark as well.
Correct. Yeah, and
Wow.
we do a rosé style as well, and that's a very deep rosé. It's almost a red wine in
Oh,
color.
wow.
This has had some oak maturation. It's been in French oak for 18 months. So you are getting a lot more of that sort of texture coming through and the aromatics also from the oak. But yeah, Separavi, up until 2013, it wasn't a recognized grape in America. So all the
Oh,
wineries
wow.
working with it had to label it a proprietary name. And then
Interesting.
yeah, it's really blown up since we're able to label it the grape name, which is really a really exciting development. And we do partner with an organization called Separica, so
Okay.
Separavi in America. And the two organizers have done a Separavi festival at our winery the past few years. So definitely keep an eye out
Okay.
for
Yeah.
details on that. And
Well,
that's
what's
just a really fun
interesting
way.
about it is there's floral, there's red fruit, there's also maybe like fig kind of essence in there, but it's very balanced. And even though darkly colored, it's not, you would expect, oh my gosh, this is going to be so overwhelmingly bold and like ridiculously heavy on the palate, but it does not come off that way. And what I love about both of these wines, and I probably we could extrapolate to a lot of your wines in general, is these are both 12% alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, lots of people are just done their dry January.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it, but okay, good for you people. But maybe looking for lower alcohol wines or wines that are not like 15% reds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that this is a red, it's only 12% alcohol, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just so easy to enjoy and not hit you over the head with the oak or the alcohol.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is that the grape in general?
Yeah, it's the more of the climate, I would say.
Okay.
Separavi is grown also in warmer climates. There are regions in Georgia that are much warmer, than the
Okay.
Finger Lakes, and it thrives there. There's also a few growers actually in South Australia working with it. Those are like monster wines. They're like very
Yeah.
intense and much higher in alcohol. And it really, that's the best thing about Separavi. It does well in both warm and cool climates, and it's one of the few red grapes that will hold its acidity, as the sugar continues to accumulate, which is a
Okay.
really unique attribute. And so we're really excited about the future of this variety. It's not something we see a lot of in other domestic regions. So
Mm-hmm.
it's become an important part of the Finger Lakes identity in just a short time.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, I know, being a woman in the wine business, myself as well, any tips or thoughts for people if they're listening to this podcast and they're interested in someday, I want to be like Meaghan. And you have so many great degrees. I introduced you earlier, but the one I was most intrigued about is the one from Adelaide, because that is one of my most favorite places I've ever visited in the world. And I cried when I left because I loved
Oh
it
my
so much there.
goodness.
So, you have so many degrees in various aspects of wine. But what would be your advice to someone out there who's looking to get into the wine industry? Maybe they're younger, maybe they want to switch careers, or maybe they just want a retirement, job in the wine industry. What other women, what would you tell them?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful, Laurie. I'm so happy that you enjoyed Adelaide because I
I
also cried
did.
when I left. It's just
Okay,
a
it's not
beautiful
just
place.
me.
That was an amazing experience, and
I
I would
bet.
say I am very privileged to be in the place where I'm at, to have this much sort of autonomy in my work because I am in a family business, and I
Mm,
definitely don't want to take that for granted.
yeah.
And I would say for me, one of the biggest sort of helps has been connecting with other women. We have a
Nice.
local Women for Wine Sense chapter in the Finger
Okay.
Lakes region. It is a national organization, but I would highly recommend anyone check. And it's not just limited to women; men can attend too. It's not
Okay, good.
discriminatory in any way. But Women for Wine Sense is a wonderful organization, and the other thing is, with wine, and I know you feel this way too, Laurie, it's there's never enough that you can learn. There's always a course, there's always something to learn because regions are always changing, rules are always changing. So there's always education that you can continue to do. And I've met so many people through different classes, whether it be WSET,
Absolutely.
Wine Scholar Guild, things like that. And those people can really become mentors, and also you can share sort of tips and tricks. Like, I think finding your community and finding your group in those
Absolutely.
channels has been really helpful to me, at least.
I love that. Yeah, just get out and start learning and visiting wineries. To me,
Yep.
every time I visit a winery, like go through the spiel, the basic spiel. I want to hear it because you always learn something more or just reinforce what you already know. And each winery has a different way of telling their story. And I love yours. I'm so thankful for you coming
Thank
on the
you, Laurie.
show.